All right, welcome back to the show. Senator Ted Cruz of the great state of Texas, and very importantly, author of Justice Corrupted, How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. You know, Senator Cruz, maybe this is a believe it or not, but I read the book and really liked it, and I'm here to recommend it. One click on Amazon or whatever your favorite method is. I mean, it's a really good book. Lots of power-packed history in that book. And you have bipartisan criticism, which I also love, going back to the Nixon years. So I want to ask you, I mean, this special prosecutor, I mean, 3 days after Trump announces, whatever one thinks of Trump announcing, pro or con, 3 days after he announces, here comes the latest special prosecutor or special counsel on Trump, on Mar-a-Lago, on January 6th. This is right out of your book. I mean, you really need to write a new last chapter of your book because... well, you've called it absolutely disgraceful, and I suspect you're right.
Well, thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. You're right. That's what this book is entirely about. It is about how the Barack Obama administration politicized and weaponized the Department of Justice and the FBI and the IRS and law enforcement and the CIA. And then under Donald Trump, those hardcore partisans burrowed into senior career positions, waged war on Donald Trump for the 4 years of the Trump presidency. And now under Joe Biden, it is absolutely metastasized. They are openly partisan. And I got to say, it's striking. The book came out just a couple of weeks ago. It shot to the bestseller list, which I certainly appreciate. But just as I released the book, the FBI raids Donald Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago, the first time in the history of our country that's ever been done. Just as I released the book, Merrick Garland announces he's appointing a special prosecutor with the intention of indicting Donald Trump. Listen, this attorney general has turned the Department of Justice into the enforcement henchman of the White House and the DNC. And I got to tell you, Larry, I hear repeatedly from FBI agents, from prosecutors at the Department of Justice who are horrified at what should be nonpartisan, what should be. I don't want a Republican DOJ. I don't want a Republican FBI. I don't want a Democrat DOJ or FBI either. I want a DOJ and FBI that enforces the law. And under Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, it is instead a partisan weapon. And that's an incredible threat to the rule of law and to everyone's liberty.
You know, it's interesting, just as a brief sidebar, my friends, and your friends too, I think, on the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, have been slamming Donald Trump ever since the election. Okay, they're slamming him daily. Whatever one thinks of that, I frankly think they've gone way too far, but that's an aside. They did, however, or they do agree with you that this special prosecutor is a very bad idea, basically for the reasons that you're mentioning, that this is a weaponization of law enforcement. And the other thing is, Senator Cruz, it seems to me the remit here is far-reaching, that you're talking about a major fishing expedition in the next couple of years as Trump may or may not run or get through the primaries. I'm not here to predict that outcome, but I am here to criticize what's the remit. It's not just Mar-a-Lago. It's not just January 6th. This thing could roam far and wide into who knows there.
Yeah. Look, Larry, I've talked about this at great length on the podcast that I do 3 times a week, Verdict with Ted Cruz, where we've gone in and explained what's going on inside at DOJ. And you really go back a couple of months ago when DOJ began leaking that they intend to indict Hunter Biden. And set aside for a second that DOJ leaking, that's not how a Department of Justice is supposed to operate. That's pure politics. But my assessment back then when they leaked it, what they said about Hunter Biden is they were going to go after him for drug charges and income tax charges. Both of those are personal. They're directed to him. And listen, at the end of the day, our concern is not with some troubled soul who has substance abuse issues. The reason that's a matter of public concern is the very significant evidence of official corruption of Joe Biden, the president of the United States, and before that, the vice president. And I believe what DOJ was doing was, number one, by leaking they're going to go after Hunter for the personal stuff, they're walling off all of the official corruption. They don't want to look at Joe. They don't want to look at the White House. They just want to say, poor fellow with substance abuse problems. But number two, I think that was the first shoe to drop so they could then appoint this special prosecutor and indict Donald Trump and say, look how even-handed we are. We indict a Biden, we indict a Trump, not politics at all. This is 100% politics. In over 2 centuries of our nation's history, this has never happened. Banana republics do this. Banana republics, when one party gets in power, turn around and prosecute their predecessors and try to lock them up and put them in jail. Now Joe Biden is trying to turn America into the Democrat equivalent of that, and it's wrong.
Yeah, weaponization is a very bad trend. Senator, let me turn to some other things here. So the GOP will take the House, not quite the Senate. Maybe it'll be 50-50 if Herschel Walker wins, maybe not. My question to you is the Republican Party poised, ready, organized to really make it clear to the American people that the Republicans have an agenda for economic growth and prosperity? And I mean a broad-based agenda. Spending, taxing, regulating, of course, opening up the spigots on fossil fuels, but also stopping crime is pro-growth. Stopping the borders, closing the borders would be pro-growth. In other words, can the GOP show the public that they will make good stewards of economic prosperity? Because I'm not sure they made that case convincingly during the last election.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, and I hope so. We need to stand up and lead, and that means, number one, serious oversight from the House of Representatives. That means investigating all of these policies that are hurting the American people, the policies of waste and fraud and spending trillions of dollars that are driving up inflation, the war on domestic energy production that's driving up the cost of gasoline, all of the soft on crime prosecutors and the zealots advocating for abolishing the police and how that is driving up crime. We need to be fighting all of that. And I'll tell you, in the Senate, you know, we just had last week, as you know, a leadership battle in the Senate. It's first time in 16 years that Mitch McConnell's been leader that there's been a leadership battle. And I stood up, I made a motion that we should delay leadership elections until after December 6th, until after the Georgia runoff. I said, Herschel Walker deserves to have a say in our leadership. And we need to have a debate about what Republicans in the Senate are going to stand for. Are we going to fight? And my motion needed 25 senators to vote for it to pass. It ended up getting 16, so I fell just 9 senators short. But what was valuable is we had 2 days of extended debate where I asked our leadership, I said, listen, is there anything that we're willing to fight on? Because right now, a lot of the American people believe we're not willing to fight. I think we need to pick big issues and stand and fight. And I suggested several. I suggested, number one, we should be fighting right now to stop Joe Biden from firing thousands of soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines who dedicated their lives to defending this country, who Biden is firing just because they declined to get the COVID vaccine. I said, we ought to use legislative power to fight that. Next year, we ought to draw a line in the sand and fight and say, we will not fund 87,000 new IRS agents who will descend upon the American people and persecute the American people, whom Biden will weaponize to target you. We ought to draw the line in the sand and say, we're not going to fund that, and we're going to put that money on the southern border to secure our border. Now, I'll tell you, our leadership wasn't eager to engage in any of those fights. But I think it was beneficial that we're having that conversation. I'm going to keep pressing. I think if you want to win and lead, you got to demonstrate you're willing to fight and you believe in what you're saying. That's what I'm trying to get my colleagues to stand up and do all together.
Why not, by the by, why not take H.R. 1, which I think might come out of the House, and support that would essentially turn the oil and gas spigots back on, permitting, fracking,
yes,
pipelining,
yes,
refining.
yes.
I mean, why not start there? I mean, I think 80% of the country would be in favor of that, and that would be a good shepherd for returning to economic prosperity. I mean, I think that one right there would be a great place, Senator.
Look, I think fighting not just for energy independence, but for energy dominance. The United States of America is the world's leading producer of oil and gas. It's dropped precipitously from where we were because Joe Biden has systematically waged war through more than 20 different regulatory assaults on oil and gas. But not just that, going after capital. You look at their banking regulators that are making it harder and harder for banks to loan for new oil exploration. And you look at the SEC, who's making it harder and harder to raise new equity capital. If you can't get equity and you can't get debt, you're out of luck. And this is by design. And I got to say, Larry, it is difficult to explain. I don't know how these leftists articulate why. They want America to produce less oil and gas, while at the same time, they want our enemies to produce more. They want Iran to produce more oil. They want Venezuela to produce more oil. They are in the process of shifting oil and gas production from among the cleanest production on earth, which is in the United States of America, that produces American jobs, to our enemies who produce oil and gas much, much dirtier, who pollute more, and who use that money to fund efforts to murder Americans. It makes zero sense.
Last one, Senator Cruz. You know I can't help myself. So your speech at the Republican Jewish Coalition, you blew the roof off. You got a standing ovation. So why don't you throw your hat into the presidential ring? Toss it in there. In fact, I'll get you a hat. I have some lovely English trilbies that I would loan you to put your hat into the ring.
Well, I'll tell you what I said at the RJC is that I'm running for re-election to the Senate. I'm on the ballot in 2024, and the Democrats are coming after me. There is no Republican in the United States Senate who Democrats would like to beat more than me. Last time, it was the most expensive Senate race in United States history. They outraised and outspent me 3-1. And because I'm leading the fight against these disastrous policies, they want to take me out. And so I would encourage folks listening, go to tedcruz.org, 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 because we need the contributions you're making to get reelected and also to stand and fight to take our country back. Tomorrow, I'm headed to Georgia to do a rally with Herschel Walker and Lindsey Graham and Sean Hannity, because that December 6th runoff is critically important. And so your contributions make a big difference. And I'm focused on the fight in the United States Senate right now. There'll be plenty of time to worry about the presidential.
All right, Senator. If you change your mind, I have a lovely classic English trilby to loan you for such an endeavor. Senator Ted,
at least make it a cowboy hat, Larry.
Nah, I have a cavalry hat too. Senator Ted Cruz, thank you very much.